Why was everyone laughing at her before she even fired a single round? Fort Bennink's rifle range shimmered under the Georgia sun, a sea of camo, sweat, and swagger. 200 soldiers filled the bleachers, restless and eager for spectacle. But the laughter wasn't friendly. It was sharp, mocking, pointed at one woman standing alone at lane 15. Rachel Thompson, Maintenance Division, 5'3", a small frame swallowed by her coveralls, stood holding an M4 carbine that looked more like junk than weapon. Duct tape wrapped the stock. The handguard was cracked. Rust climbed along the barrel like creeping vines. She held it close, fingers trembling against the metal, the kind of trembling that drew whispers. "Get that piece of junk off my range." The shout cut through the morning haze like a thunderclap. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, 6'4", broad, decorated, loud. A ranger who carried his arrogance like another medal. He towered over her, his shadow long and cruel. "This is a professional competition, not a charity event," he barked. "You lost maintenance, scrap yard, that way." Laughter followed him like loyal troops. The kind of laughter soldiers used to hide insecurity, cruel, echoing, and loud enough to make someone disappear inside themselves. Rachel didn't respond. She simply adjusted her grip, the tremor in her hands making the rifle quiver like it wanted to cry. But one man, Range Officer Williams, leaned forward, watching closely. Something about the way she moved, something wasn't right. Her stance, her footing, it wasn't random. It was measured, familiar, like someone who'd done this thousands of times before in silence. To everyone else, she looked like a joke. To him, she looked like a memory. Marcus strutted closer, his ranger tab glinting in the sunlight. "Lady, that weapon's one bad sneeze away from falling apart." Rachel's voice came out quiet, almost calm. "It still chambers NATO rounds." He frowned. "Excuse me." "Regulations," she said softly. "Section 432. Any rifle that can chamber and fire standard NATO ammunition is permitted, regardless of condition." That stopped him. Stopped the laughter, too. Nobody expected the trembling woman to quote military regulation like a lawyer reading a death sentence. Williams walked over, curiosity winning out. "May I?" Rachel handed him the rifle. No resistance, just patience. He inspected it, saw the warped barrel, the cracked stock, the nearly useless trigger. It was junk, no doubt about it. But when he loaded a round and fired downrange, the weapon barked obediently. The bullet went wide, but it fired. "She's technically correct," Williams admitted, reluctant. "But ma'am, you're not going to hit much with this." Rachel just nodded once. "We'll see." That answer, quiet, unshaken, carried more weight than a shout ever could. The crowd snickered again, but a few faces had changed. There was confusion now, small flickers of uncertainty behind the mockery, because her calm didn't fit the scene. Her trembling didn't match her eyes that looked at the target like they already knew the outcome. Marcus leaned close, towering over her like a storm. "You're gonna hurt yourself out there," he muttered. "This is for Rangers, real soldiers." "I paid my entry fee," she replied, unmoving. "I have the right to compete." Her voice was steady, her posture unmoving. It wasn't defiance. It was something else, something older, quieter. That quiet infuriated him. "Fine," Marcus spat. "When you embarrass yourself, remember, I tried to save you the humiliation." He turned toward his squad, arms wide. "Boys and girls, looks like maintenance wants to play soldier." Phones came out. Cameras rolled. The digital age's firing squad was ready. Hashtags were already being written before the first shot fired. But she didn't look at them, didn't flinch. She only exhaled slowly, a breath she'd been holding for years. 4:30 hours. That morning had started like every other. Her alarm went off before dawn. The barracks room was small, sterile, familiar. The walls were bare except for one photo taped to the mirror, 6 soldiers in full gear, faces shadowed, smiles weary. She looked at it for 3 seconds, then turned away. Routine kept her alive. Shower uniform, medication. Her hands shook as she opened the small orange bottle. White pills rattled inside. Experimental nerve medication, meant to dull the tremors that never stopped. A gift from a program meant for combat veterans whose bodies refused to forget. She swallowed one dry, the taste bitter on her tongue. The shaking eased a little, but it never went away. It never did. By 500, she was already on the range. Nobody there yet, just her, the wind, and a sky still half asleep. She used her maintenance clearance to access the disposal shed, found the rifle marked for destruction. Barrel warped, stock split, trigger half gone. Perfect. Because it wasn't about the rifle. It was about control. Every movement she made cleaning that broken weapon was ritual. Cloth to steel, oil to memory. She moved with precision born from repetition, not the repetition of a hobby, but of survival. The kind that only people who'd needed a weapon to stay breathing understood. And when she looked down the barrel at the morning sun rising over Fort Benning, she whispered something only she could hear. Still straight enough. Back in the present, the range buzzed with anticipation. Sergeant Madison Hayes, Marcus's second-in-command, raised her phone to stream live. "Okay, followers," she said, smirking into the camera. "You won't believe this. A maintenance clerk, about to compete against rangers with a rifle held together by duct tape. Watch this." The comments started flooding in before Rachel even took her position. "No way she even hits paper. Is this a joke? That tremor, OMG, she's shaking so bad." She heard none of it, or maybe she did and let it fuel the calm. The trembling was always there, a cruel echo of something that had happened long ago, but she'd learned to make peace with it. The shakes didn't mean weakness. They were reminders that she'd survived what others hadn't. And today they'd serve her. She knelt, unzipping her range bag. Inside, neatly organized magazines, cleaning cloth, and a wrist brace. The kind of device used by surgeons for stabilization under pressure. Carbon fiber, servo-assisted. Most saw it as a medical crutch. They were wrong. It was technology adapted for combat veterans with nerve trauma, a micro-stabilizer that corrected tremors in real time. To the untrained eye, it looked like pity. To those who knew, it was precision incarnate. She slipped it on, tightened the straps, flexed her fingers. The servo whirred softly. The tremor quieted. The crowd murmured. Williams called the lineup. 20 lanes, multiple rounds, increasing difficulty. Precision, rapid fire, moving targets. And finally, the drone round. No one had ever hit all 5 drones. No one had even come close. Rachel adjusted her earmuffs, stepped into lane 15. Marcus blocked her path. "Elite shooters get lane priority," he said. "You can take what's left after the real soldiers pick." She looked up at him, steady. "It's first come, first served. That's the rule." He laughed, turning to his squad. "She's quoting rules now, how cute." Corporal Derek Chen sneered. Maybe she read the manual while scrubbing latrines. The laughter returned, ugly and loud. Then a small voice cut through it. "Leave her alone, Sergeant." Private Alina Rodriguez, barely out of basic training, stood near the gear table. The words came out shaky but sincere. "What was that, Private?" Madison turned on her. "I said she has the right to compete." Marcus grinned coldly. "How noble." He kicked Rachel's range bag. It fell, spilling ammunition across the concrete. Gasps, then laughter again. Rachel didn't curse, didn't even sigh. She knelt, collecting each round slowly, deliberately, checking each one before placing it back. The way she did it, with precision even through shaking fingers, made several veterans in the stands frown. That wasn't the motion of a beginner. That was muscle memory. That was training. High above, Master Sergeant John Harrison leaned forward from the observation deck. Something about her movement scratched at his memory, something from a place that didn't officially exist. He'd seen hands like that before. Hands that shook when idle but turned to steel when aimed. 800 hours. Range is hot, Williams called. 20 shooters lined up, targets at 100 meters, 10 rounds, 2 minutes. Marcus grinned at his team. Let's show maintenance what real shooting looks like. The Rangers opened fire, tight bursts, controlled breathing. Their targets filled with clean groupings, 9s and 10s. Professional, polished, predictable. Rachel didn't move. She lay prone, broken rifle resting on an improvised support she'd built from her bag and mat. A setup so meticulous it looked like art. Seconds ticked by. 10, 20, 30. Whispers rippled through the crowd. She froze. She's scared. She can't even fire. Madison called out mockingly, loud noises bothering you, maintenance. Still, Rachel didn't respond. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes softened. The tremor synchronized with her heartbeat, a rhythm she knew by memory. Then the first shot. The digital scoreboard blinked. 10 ring, dead center. Gasps rippled through the bleachers. Lucky, Marcus muttered. The second shot came. 10 ring, nearly the same hole. The third. 10 ring again. By the fifth shot, her group was a single ragged hole, impossibly tight for a rifle that shouldn't shoot straight at all. Phones stopped recording jokes. Now they recorded disbelief. Williams stared at the monitor. She's compensating for a 3.7-inch barrel drift in real time, he whispered. No scope adjustments. Colonel Patterson, who'd arrived quietly on the deck, leaned in. You're saying she's reading that manually? Yes, sir, that's not possible. But it was happening. Each squeeze of her trembling finger was surgical. Each shot followed a logic no one else could see. And when the 10th round fired, the range fell silent. Her score, 100 out of 100. With a broken rifle. And shaking hands. Marcus broke the silence first. Systems malfunctioning, he said quickly. Has to be. It's not, Williams replied. Diagnostics clean, every shot verified. Then she cheated. Someone shouted, but no one believed it. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. Even the Rangers had stopped smirking. Because deep down, they all felt it, that weight in the air when something extraordinary hides behind the ordinary. Rachel stood, saved her rifle, and stepped back, her expression unreadable. For her, it wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving something to herself, that the body might break, but the discipline never did. And as the murmurs spread, as the disbelief thickened, as the veterans exchanged knowing looks, one question echoed quietly among them all. Who is she? When the last shell casing stopped spinning, silence took the range. No one clapped. No one spoke. It was as if 200 soldiers had collectively forgotten how to breathe. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Rachel lay still for a long moment, her cheek resting against the worn stock. Her hands trembled again, now that it was over, now that control wasn't needed. The body always remembered. The body always shook after calm. She safed the rifle, rose to one knee, and quietly began cleaning her weapon. Not a word, no celebration, no pride, just the deliberate movements of someone doing what needed to be done. That calm unnerved them more than her accuracy. Williams stared at his monitor, still rerunning the data feed in disbelief. The ballistic tracker showed 0 deviation between her sight line and bullet path. No corrections, no wasted motion. It wasn't just skill. It was perfection inside imperfection. Colonel Patterson whispered to no one in particular, "You don't learn that in maintenance." On the bleachers, the laughter had turned to murmurs. "That rifle's a mess, man. It shouldn't even group like that." She didn't even move. Did you see her breathing pattern? I've seen that before somewhere, but where? Marcus Rodriguez stood motionless, his arms crossed tight across his chest, his jaw working furiously. This wasn't supposed to happen, not on his range, not under his command. A clerk, a maintenance clerk, had just outshot every ranger on the line. "Malfunction," he said again, louder this time as if the word could erase reality. "She must have rigged something." But his voice cracked slightly, betraying the truth. He was rattled. Madison Hayes, his second, stared at the screen on her phone, the live stream still running. The viewer count had tripled. Comments were exploding, but the laughter had stopped there too. The feed now pulsed with disbelief, awe, and silence. "She's shaking but shooting perfect. How? Is she XSOF? That's not luck, that's training." Madison ended the stream quietly, for once out of words. Williams called for the next phase, his voice uncertain. "Second round, rapid fire. 30 rounds, 30 seconds. Magazine changes required. Prepare for reset." The sound of target motors whirring filled the air. Technicians moved quickly, resetting systems. The crowd shifted uneasily, still watching Rachel. Marcus moved closer, forcing a smirk back onto his face. "Nice trick, maintenance," he said, leaning down beside her lane. "But this next round's about speed. Precision doesn't help when you can't keep up. Try not to drop your rifle." Rachel didn't look at him. She was checking her magazines, not casually, deliberately. One by one. She tested each feed lip, checked the spring tension, wiped away invisible debris. Every movement carried history. Williams noticed again. So did Harrison on the observation platform. That wasn't habit, that was procedure, combat procedure. Harrison narrowed his eyes. "That's not how mechanics handle ammo," he muttered under his breath. "That's how shooters who have lost friends to bad magazines do it." Marcus didn't hear him. He was too busy psyching himself up, shaking out his arms, regaining his rhythm. He turned to his squad, voice low but harsh. "We're not letting her embarrass us again. Lock in. Show the crowd what Rangers look like." His men nodded, but there was uncertainty in their faces. The crowd, once rowdy and loud, now waited quietly. Nobody wanted to miss what might happen next. "Shooters ready," Williams called. Rachel took her place, prone again, trembling hands resting on the broken rifle. "Stand by." A faint click as she seated her first magazine. "Fire." Gunfire erupted. 20 rifles barked in unison, a staccato symphony of thunder. The Rangers shot controlled pairs, standard doctrine. 2 shots assess, 2 shots assess. Precise, confident, mechanical. Rachel's rifle sounded different. Not frantic, not panicked, fluid, continuous. A rhythm like music, each burst perfectly spaced. She wasn't firing in pairs, she was firing in motion. Her tremor, that constant betrayal of her nerves, turned into cadence. The rhythm of her shaking became part of her aim. 10 shots, magazine drop. The empty mag hadn't even hit the ground before the next was seated. The movement was seamless, so fast it looked rehearsed beyond reason. Even Marcus faltered mid-string, glancing sideways. What the hell? She didn't stop. Targets appeared at 50, 100, 150 meters, switching every few seconds. Each shot hit dead center. No hesitation. No missed beats. The scoreboard kept climbing. Perfect, perfect, perfect. By the time she hit her last target, she still had 3 seconds left. 30 rounds, 30 hits. Each pattern deliberate, not just on target, but placed where they'd be lethal if those targets had been alive. Pelvis, center mass, head. 50 meters, 100, 150. Each hit was surgical. When the final tone signaled ceasefire, the range went still again. Smoke hung in the air. Williams stared at his monitor, awestruck. 30 for 30, he said softly. 0 deviation, no wasted time. Patterson crossed his arms. "That's impossible." "Sir," Williams said, shaking his head, "the system doesn't do impossible. It just records what it sees. Down on the line, Rachel was already reloading calmly. She didn't even look up at the scoreboard. To her, it wasn't about them. It wasn't about winning. It was about control, the quiet kind, the kind you only learn when your life depends on it. The murmurs grew. She's not maintenance. She's done this before. What kind of training is that? Marcus finally snapped. He stalked up to her lane, his tone somewhere between anger and fear. You think you can come in here and humiliate Rangers? She looked up at him, calm, unflinching. I didn't come here for you. He froze because something in her voice, that soft tone so controlled, didn't sound defensive. It sounded final. Break, Williams announced. 15 minutes, third round, moving targets. The crowd exhaled collectively. Conversations broke out like whispers through dry grass. Everyone had something to say, but no one knew quite how to say it. On the observation platform, Harrison was texting quietly on a secure device. A few words, nothing more. Ghost pattern confirmed. Bennying main range. Send eyes. He hit send. The message traveled far, to places and people who didn't exist on paper anymore. Rachel sat on the bench, cleaning her rifle again. Her hands trembled more now, the aftershock of focus. The medication dulled the nerves, but stress brought them back in waves. She ignored it, focusing on each screw, each spring. She wasn't thinking about the Rangers. She wasn't thinking about the crowd. She was thinking about memory, a desert wind, a sand-choked night, the smell of cordite and blood. The same tremor in her hands. The same rifle, warped and failing. The same rhythm she'd found then. The rhythm that had kept her team alive for 17 hours. But she didn't think about that out loud. She just worked quietly. Marcus approached again, slower this time, less bluster. Listen, he began, rubbing the back of his neck. That rifle of yours, it's dangerous. You should let someone inspect it again, for safety. Rachel looked up at him, eyes steady. You do what you need to, Sergeant. Something in her tone made him take a step back. Not hostility, something colder. The kind of authority that didn't come from rank. The kind that came from surviving. He turned and walked away, but the tremor in his hands now matched hers. Around the range, murmurs turned into quiet conversations. She's not supposed to be here. You saw those groupings, that special operations level control. No way Command doesn't know who she is. Colonel Patterson made a discreet call of his own. His voice was low but urgent. Check file. Rachel E. Thompson, Maintenance Division, transfer 3 months ago. Look deeper. He listened, waited, his expression changed. Then he hung up, eyes narrowing toward lane 15. Redacted, he murmured. Her entire record's redacted. Harrison glanced sideways. Sir, what does that mean? It means she's not who she says she is. Down on the line, Rachel stood again, stretching out her hands. The tremor danced along her fingers, constant, rhythmic. She took a slow breath and let her eyes close for a heartbeat. Every part of her knew what was coming next. The moving targets, unpredictable, fast, chaotic. Perfect for proving who she really was. Or maybe proving what she still wasn't ready to stop being. 15 minutes later, the crowd settled again. The heat pressed down hard, the air thick with expectation. Williams stepped forward with his clipboard. Round 3, moving targets, random intervals 50 to 200 meters. Time limit, 60 seconds. Speed increases with every hit. He looked down at Rachel, voice quieter now. You good, ma'am? Rachel nodded once, always. Her tone wasn't bravado, it was fact. Marcus and his team took their lanes again, quieter this time. No jokes, no smirks, they just watched her warily. Range is hot, Williams called. Shooters ready. The targets started moving. Metal silhouettes sliding along tracks, popping up and down unpredictably. Left to right to left, fast. The Rangers opened fire first, hitting several but missing others. Rachel didn't track her targets. She aimed where they were going. Her first shot, a single crack, hit a moving target square in the chest before it reached midpoint. Predictive shooting, the kind that comes from instinct, not training manuals. The second appeared at 150 meters, moving fast. She fired once, down. Then two targets popped up at once, different ranges, opposite directions. Two shots so close they sounded like one. Both dropped. The crowd gasped. By now, even Marcus had stopped firing. He was just watching, disbelief painted across his face. The rest of the sequence blurred into something surreal. Rachel's rifle barked, steady as a metronome. Targets fell faster than they could rise. At 37 seconds, every single target was down. Perfect score. No misses. The range fell utterly silent. Williams looked at his screen. All hits confirmed, he said softly, every single one. On the observation deck, Harrison's phone buzzed again, a reply to his earlier message. On our way, confirm identity if possible, Ghost 01. His hands shook as he typed back. Still confirming, but I think so. He looked down at Rachel, the trembling hands, the calm face, the precision born of pain. Ghost 01. The name whispered in old circles, the ghost who never missed, the operator who died and somehow didn't. He swallowed hard. God help us, he muttered, it's her. On the range, Rachel exhaled slowly. Her trembling hands lowered the rifle. For the first time all morning, she allowed herself a small smile, not of victory, of relief. She'd been waiting for this moment for years, the moment her ghosts caught up. And from the way the crowd now looked at her, silent, uncertain, almost reverent, she knew. They were starting to see. They didn't understand yet, but they would. Because some ghosts didn't haunt from graves. Some walked among the living, quiet, trembling, and steady as stone. She had silenced them. But silence, in places like Fort Benning, never lasted long. When the moving targets stopped clattering and the range lights dimmed to standby, the air hung thick with disbelief. Even the cicadas seemed hesitant to break the moment. Rachel stood at her lane, head slightly bowed, trembling hands steadying the cracked rifle across her chest. Around her, the rangers whispered to one another like schoolchildren caught misbehaving. What the hell was that? She's not normal, you don't just shoot like that. That tremor, it disappears when she's firing. Rumors had started before the echo of her last shot even faded. At the far end of the bleachers, Colonel Patterson slipped his phone back into his pocket. His jaw was tight, his eyes distant. The information he'd received during the break still burned in his thoughts. Rachel E. Thompson, prior assignments redacted. Clearance level, restricted access above top secret. He'd seen a few files like that before, usually connected to units that didn't officially exist. Now one of them was standing on his range, disguised as a maintenance clerk. "Sir," Williams murmured beside him, still glued to the monitor, "the system logged her data again, every shot perfect. But it's not just that. The algorithm marked something strange." Patterson turned. "Strange how?" "Her trigger squeeze pattern. It's a signature. The system's AI compares microdelays between shots. Every trained shooter's pattern is unique. Hers matches something in the old database." Patterson frowned. "What database?" "Ghost Unit Training Archives." That word ghost landed like a shot. Patterson's mouth went dry. Down on the line, the crowd finally began to stir again, though the laughter was gone now, replaced by a low hum of nervous speculation. Marcus Rodriguez sat on the bench beside his squad, silent, his pride bleeding out with every replay of Rachel's perfect runs. The mocking sergeant who had strutted across the range hours ago now stared at the ground, jaw clenched, pulse thudding in his ears. He didn't understand what he was feeling, anger, shame, fear, maybe all of it mixed together. Madison Hayes, his second in command, kept glancing toward Rachel, her face pale. The same woman she'd mocked online now stood like something out of legend, small, scarred, trembling, but unshakable. "She's what?" Madison whispered. "Special Forces." Derek Chen, the weapons specialist, scoffed weakly. If she was, she wouldn't be stuck fixing jeeps. But the words felt hollow, even to him. Private Elena Rodriguez sat near the ammo table, hands clasped tight. She defended Rachel once that morning, but now she watched her with wide, quiet awe. The maintenance clerk she'd pitied was something else entirely. "Third round complete," Williams announced, his voice betraying the tremor in his throat. "We'll begin the final challenge shortly, after equipment check. Drone targets." The mention of drones stirred the crowd again. The drone round was famous and infamous. 5 high-speed quadcopters designed to mimic evasive combat targets. No one had ever hit all 5. The record, 3 in 45 seconds, belonged to a 2-man special operations team. No one expected a single shooter to match that. Certainly not a maintenance clerk with a broken rifle. While the technicians reset the drone systems, movement rippled beyond the bleachers. Unmarked SUVs rolled up along the gravel path, their engines quiet, their presence not. They didn't bear any insignia, but every soldier who saw them knew. Government plates, civilian clothes, military bearing. These weren't spectators. Harrison noticed first, his spine straightened. "Oh hell," he muttered, "they're here." "Who?" Patterson asked, though he already knew. "The ones you call when ghosts walk." Rachel noticed the vehicles, too. She didn't react, but her hands paused slightly as she disassembled her rifle's bolt carrier group, cleaning it with the same care she might have given a wounded comrade. Her reflection in the rifle's metal stared back at her, eyes tired, focused, unwavering. The tremor worsened slightly when she stopped moving, so she didn't stop for long. Stillness was her enemy. Motion was peace. In her mind, ghosts whispered, not voices, just echoes. 6 names she could never forget. Reynolds, Baker, Chen, Williams, Park, Thompson. They were always there. Watching. Waiting. And she'd promised them answers. Marcus stood suddenly, his voice cutting through the low murmur. "Hold up." He walked out toward Rachel, the crowd watching him like a man walking into his own trial. "You've made your point," he said, forcing a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But this isn't a shooting gallery. This is about being a soldier, about combat. So how about a little demonstration, hand to hand?" The crowd stirred uneasily. "Come on," Marcus pressed, louder now. "Let's see what the maintenance clerk can do without a rifle, unless you're scared." "Sergeant," Williams began, alarmed. But Marcus wasn't listening. Pride was a stubborn disease. He took another step forward, puffing his chest. "Come on, maintenance. Let's give the people a show." Rachel looked up at him. Her expression didn't change. "I didn't come here for this." "That's what I thought," he said. "You only know how to hide behind a gun." The range had gone deathly still. Williams looked toward Colonel Patterson, who seemed ready to intervene, but Rachel's voice stopped him cold. "It's fine, sir," she said softly. "If he needs this, I'll oblige." Marcus grinned, victorious already. "Perfect. Just a friendly demonstration, right? Show the troops how real Rangers fight." They cleared a space in front of the bleachers. Marcus stripped off his outer gear, standing in his t-shirt, muscles taut under sunburnt skin, tattoos of Ranger tabs running down his arms. Rachel set her rifle gently on the bench and removed her jacket. Beneath it, a plain brown shirt clung to her frame. Her hands trembled openly now. No stance, no flourish, just stillness. "Submission or knockout?" Marcus asked. "Whatever you prefer." He came in fast, a bull rush. She wasn't there. Her sidestep was so minimal it barely registered. His own momentum carried him forward, past her, off balance. She touched his elbow as he passed, Just a tap, enough to redirect. He stumbled, recovered, and turned, face flushed. The crowd murmured. Marcus swung again, a right hook this time, hard and fast. Rachel ducked under it, the movement small, efficient, controlled. "Stop dancing and fight," he snarled, embarrassed now. He jabbed again, heavier this time. She gave ground, letting him expend himself, turning his aggression into exhaustion. Then he feinted left and threw a right cross that caught her shoulder. The fabric of her shirt tore with the force, the sound harsh in the silence. Marcus reached to grab her collar for leverage and pulled. The shirt ripped open, and the world stopped. Beneath the torn fabric, black ink glistened under the sun. A massive eagle spread its wings across her chest, talons gripping a sniper rifle, each feather etched with precision so perfect it looked alive. But what made the crowd gasp wasn't the artistry, it was the details. 6 feathers, 6 initials. RCWPTB. Below the eagle. Death from above. And under that, smaller words burned into her skin like confession. Ghost Squadron, NUNQUAMOBLITUS. Never forgotten. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ghost, someone whispered. Ghost Squadron. No way. Even Marcus froze, his grip slackening. His face shifted from confusion to realization to horror. Up on the observation deck, Harrison went pale. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, "it's her." Patterson's throat tightened. He'd heard the stories every soldier had. Operation Blackout. 6 ghost operators deployed, 1 returned. A mission so catastrophic it was sealed within 24 hours. Classified reports said all members were KIA, but rumors said otherwise. Rumors said the team leader, Ghost 01, had survived. Rumors said she carried her team's initials carved into her skin. Rumors said she'd vanished into obscurity after recovery, broken in body but not in will. And now she stood on Fort Benning's rifle range, shaking hands steady as stone. Marcus released her shirt as if it burned him. You're. Rachel closed the torn fabric calmly, fingers trembling more from memory than fear. Colonel Patterson stepped forward, voice heavy. "Master Sergeant Rachel Thompson," he said, "Ghost 01, I thought you were dead." "Thompson died," she said softly. "I'm just maintenance now." Nobody spoke. Patterson's voice rose, carrying across the stunned crowd. "What you're looking at is the team leader of Ghost Squadron, Task Force 88. 127 confirmed kills, 17 deployments, medals so classified they don't exist on paper." He turned toward Marcus, his eyes like steel. "5 years ago, her unit took a mission meant for yours, Sergeant Rodriguez. They were ambushed. 6 went in. 1 came out. She fought for 17 hours, wounded 11 times to recover her team's bodies. She carried 200 pounds of gear and remains to extraction." The words hit like artillery. Marcus staggered backward, the color draining from his face. Madison Hayes dropped her phone. Derek Chen looked like he might be sick. Private Elena Rodriguez stood frozen, tears forming in her eyes. Rachel said nothing. She just looked at them, trembling hands at her sides, gaze distant, beyond the range, beyond the base, somewhere deep in memory. The crowd began to whisper, the sound more like prayer than gossip. "Ghost 01 alive. She carried them home. How is she even?" Marcus fell to his knees. "I didn't know," he stammered. "I swear I didn't know." "No," Rachel said quietly, "you didn't." Her voice carried over the field, not loud, but absolute. And the weight of it pressed down on every soul who'd laughed at her hours before. Patterson looked at her, the scars, the tremor, the history written in ink and silence. "Master Sergeant," he said finally, voice rough, "if you're here, then the ghosts aren't finished, are they?" Rachel's eyes lifted to meet his. "No, sir, not yet." The range remained silent for a long time. No commands. No laughter. Just 200 soldiers staring at a woman who had lived what legends whispered. Then Williams, his voice trembling, broke the stillness. "Final round, drones," he said. "Do you still want to?" Rachel looked down at her broken rifle, then at the crowd still frozen between shame and awe. "Might as well finish what I started." No one dared speak as Rachel stepped back to her lane. The weight of truth had settled over Fort Bennink's rifle range like a shroud. The laughter that once filled the air was gone, replaced by something heavier, rawer. Awe, shame, fear. Everyone now knew what the trembling woman with the broken rifle really was. Not a clerk. Not a fluke. A ghost returned. Rachel's torn shirt hung loosely from her shoulder. Private Elena Rodriguez rushed forward, offering her own jacket. Rachel accepted it with a small nod, gratitude without words. Williams cleared his throat, his voice cracked slightly. "Final round, drone targets. Time limit 60 seconds. 5 drones, maximum difficulty." No one moved. No one breathed. Marcus sat where he'd fallen, still staring at the ground, face pale and eyes empty. He hadn't gotten up since Patterson's revelation. Madison Hayes stood near him, trembling not from fear of Rachel, but from what they'd all done. The bleachers, once filled with jeering voices, now stood silent. Hundreds of soldiers, hardened, trained, proud, were now staring at one woman as if seeing war itself embodied in human form. Rachel adjusted the lone jacket, zipped it halfway, and checked her rifle again. The duct tape, the rust, the warp, all still there. She didn't need perfection. She needed truth. The crowd parted as she walked. Even Patterson moved aside, watching her pass. His voice, when it came, was low. "Let her work." The sky had shifted, that late afternoon gold that softened everything but eyes. The sun glared off the electronic targets, now replaced by 5 hovering drones waiting at standby. They were small, fast, and merciless, military training drones programmed with random evasive maneuvers. No one had ever hit all 5. Williams gave her a nervous glance. "You ready, ma'am?" Rachel's hands shook as she chambered around. "Always ready," she said. The phrase carried weight, the kind that wasn't about competition, the kind soldiers used before missions they might not return from. Williams stepped back, heart hammering. "All lanes standby, range is hot." The drones lifted off, engines whining like angry hornets. They darted skyward, splitting, weaving, zigzagging at speeds that made tracking almost impossible. Rachel raised her rifle. Her hands trembled visibly. The crowd saw it, the shake of damaged nerves, the ghost of old trauma. Then the first drone streaked across the sky, 40 miles per hour, 30 feet up. One shot. The rifle cracked. The drone exploded midair. The sound hit the crowd like thunder. Before anyone could process, the second drone swooped low, a blur of motion at ground level. Rachel pivoted, breath steady, heartbeat synchronized to her aim. She fired once. The drone disintegrated. The third drone dropped into a dive, vanishing behind a barrier. Rachel didn't chase it with her eyes. She aimed through the wall, fired through plywood. A second later, the drone's fragments scattered into sunlight. The fourth and fifth drones launched together, crossing paths, darting unpredictably. Rachel exhaled. The tremor turned rhythmic again, each shake aligning with the rifle's heartbeat. 2 shots. Barely distinguishable. 2 drones down. Total time, 11.7 seconds. 5 drones. 5 kills. New world record. The range erupted, not in cheers, but in stunned silence so complete that the hum of drone engines still dying on the ground sounded like distant thunder. Williams' voice barely worked. All drones down, 11.7 seconds, perfect score. He turned to Patterson, eyes wide. "Sir, that's impossible." Patterson didn't answer. He was watching Rachel. Because she wasn't celebrating. She wasn't smiling. She just lowered the rifle, safed it, and set it on the bench like she'd just finished routine maintenance. Then she whispered, so quietly that only the wind seemed to hear it. "It's done." The silence broke first in the bleachers. Whispers, then murmurs, then a ripple of disbelief. Someone began to clap, hesitant, uncertain. Another joined, then more. But Rachel didn't acknowledge them. She wasn't there for applause. She reached into her range bag, pulling out a worn photograph, edges frayed, corners soft. 6 people stood in desert gear, faces blurred by sun and memory. Her team, Ghost Squadron. She traced each face with her trembling fingers. Reynolds, Baker, Chen, Williams, Park, Thompson, she murmured, naming them one by one. "My brothers." The crowd had gone quiet again, listening. "They died because 2 Rangers wanted money more than honor," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "But they died as warriors. They died thinking the mission was betrayed from the outside, not from within." Heads turned. Confusion rippled through the crowd. "What is she talking about?" someone whispered. Patterson straightened. "Sergeant Thompson," he began carefully, "you have information about." Before he could finish, another voice cut in from the stands. Captain Sarah Kim, JAG Corps, her insignia glinting. She'd been there since morning, quiet, observant. She stepped forward now, eyes locked on Rachel. "She's right," Kim said. "I've been investigating Operation Blackout for months. The intel leak that led to the Ghost Squadron ambush didn't come from overseas." Gasps rippled through the ranks. Kim's voice was sharp, deliberate. "It came from right here, Fort Benning." Every ranger on Marcus's team froze. Kim continued. "Encrypted financial deposits traced back 5 years. Communication logs redacted but recovered through secondary encryption, all pointing to a source within this base, within this unit." Derek Chin made a sound half groan, half panic. No, that's not possible." Kim's eyes narrowed. "Funny you should say that, Corporal Chen, because those deposits were made to an account connected to your clearance level." The range turned colder than steel. Derek's face drained of color. His hand twitched toward his sidearm, instinct, panic, survival. Rachel was already moving. Trembling hands or not, she crossed the distance like a shadow. Her palm pressed against his wrist before the gun even cleared the holster. "Don't," she said softly. Her tone wasn't threatening, it was pitying. "You knew," Derek whispered, voice cracking. "You knew and you came here anyway." "I suspected," Rachel corrected. "My team's last transmission mentioned compromised intel. They thought it was external. I wasn't sure. So I requested transfer here, maintenance division. Nobody looks at maintenance." Marcus looked up, eyes wide, realization dawning like a wound opening. "The competition, you set this up." "I needed confirmation," Rachel said. Her voice was calm, surgical. "And you gave it to me. You referenced a Ranger school application I never made. That detail exists only in the classified appendices of Ghost Squadron's personnel files, files sealed after the mission, files you had access to." Derek's breath hitched. Madison took a step back. "You mean?" Rachel looked at her. "He and Specialist Brooks sold the coordinates. A dead drop on base, a transfer through encrypted line. The enemy knew our entry point to the second. 6 died. 2 got rich." At the mention of his name, Tyler Brooks, the supply sergeant, tried to run. He made it 3 steps before one of the plainclothes men from the unmarked SUVs intercepted him. Hand on his shoulder, voice low. "Don't." Tyler stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. Captain Kim raised her voice again. "Corporal Derek Chen, Specialist Tyler Brooks, you are under arrest for violation of the Espionage Act, conspiracy, and treason resulting in the deaths of 6 U.S. Special Operations personnel." No one moved. The two traders stood pale and shaking as the agent stepped forward, reading rights, placing cuffs. Tyler began to sob, a broken, choking sound. "I didn't mean for anyone to die," he babbled. "It was just money, just—" Rachel's gaze cut through him like glass. "They always die for just money." The arrest happened fast, professionals silent. Two men led away. Two ghosts finally given names. Marcus was still on his knees. Madison stood beside him, tears streaming silently down her face. Private Elena Rodriguez, the only one who defended Rachel at the start, clutched her beret tightly, eyes wide, mouth trembling. Captain Kim nodded to Patterson. "The case is closed, the evidence is confirmed, we'll handle the rest." But Patterson didn't move. He was staring at Rachel. "You've done what most couldn't," he said quietly. "You exposed them, you got justice." Rachel shook her head. "No, sir, I got closure." William stepped forward almost hesitantly. "Ma'am, do you still want to finish? The record's already yours. You don't need to prove anything." Rachel looked down at the rifle, the battered, broken, rusted weapon that had carried her truth to light. "I came here to finish," she said simply. She walked back to her lane, shouldered the rifle one last time. The range was silent again, 200 pairs of eyes fixed on her. Williams reset the system, the same command sequence he'd run 1,000 times before, though never like this. 5 drones rose again, test units now unarmed, slow-moving. The competition was over. This was symbolic. Still, Rachel treated it like war. She breathed in deep, felt the tremor run through her hands, her arms, her heart. Then she exhaled, long, slow, steady. The tremor eased. One drone. Bang. Gone. Second drone. Bang. Gone. Third, fourth, fifth, all gone before the others even reached mid-flight. Time 9.4 seconds. A new record, one she didn't even bother to acknowledge. She lowered the rifle, eyes distant. "I came looking for answers," she said softly. "I found them. My team can rest now." She bent down, picked up the photograph again, brushing a thumb across the faces frozen in time. "They deserved more than memory," she whispered. "They deserved truth." Marcus finally spoke, his voice breaking. "We didn't know," he said. "God, we didn't know." Rachel looked at him, not unkindly. "If you had known, would you have treated me any differently?" He swallowed hard, tears finally rising. "Yes, we would have shown you respect." "Then you miss the point," she said gently. "Respect shouldn't depend on a resume." She turned to the crowd, her trembling hands lowering the rifle to the bench for the last time. "You all think strength looks like medals, rank, or steady hands, but strength is quieter than that. Strength endures humiliation and still shows up. It trembles and still acts. It bleeds and still builds." Her gaze found Elena in the front row. "You stood up for me before you knew who I was. Remember that courage. It matters more than perfect aim." Elena nodded, tears streaking her face. Rachel picked up her bag. "Tell them," she said to Patterson, "tell them Ghost Squadron finished its mission." Then she turned and began to walk. The crowd parted instinctively, heads bowed, hands raised in silent salute. No one dared call her back. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Evening fell slowly over Fort Benning, that kind of slow where the light turns copper and the wind smells like dust and gun oil. The range was empty now. The echoes were gone. But the ghost stayed. Rachel sat alone in the maintenance bay, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the broken rifle laid out on the table like an old friend finally at rest. She worked quietly, brush, cloth, solvent motion. Her hands still trembled, but now it felt different. Not fear, not weakness, just memory releasing itself one shake at a time. Each patch of rust she wiped away was a piece of the day she'd carried for 5 long years. She wasn't fixing the weapon anymore. She was letting it go. The bay door creaked open, footsteps echoed, slow, hesitant. Marcus Rodriguez. He didn't wear the swagger anymore. The uniform was the same, but the weight behind it had changed. His face looked older, though only hours had passed. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Rachel didn't look up. Doors open. He stepped inside, stopping just short of her table. The silence between them was thick, almost painful. "I don't know what to say," he began. "You already said enough," Rachel replied softly, still working. "You said it when you laughed." Marcus lowered his eyes. "I was wrong, all of us were. We thought you were nothing." She finally looked up at him. Her expression wasn't angry, just tired. "You saw what you were trained to see. Weakness in tremors, failure in silence. That's how soldiers are built now, to measure worth by noise." He swallowed hard. "You deserved better." "No," she said, "they did." Marcus frowned. "Your team." She nodded. They believed in the mission, in each other. They didn't die for medals or records. They died for loyalty. That's what hurts the most, not their deaths, but how easily loyalty was sold. Marcus exhaled, shame burning in his throat. "I should have known. Chen was always flashing money he shouldn't have had. Brooks bragged about side hustles. I ignored it." Rachel's eyes softened slightly. "We all ignore things that don't fit the version of reality we want to keep." He took a step closer. "You think I can fix this?" She shook her head. "You can't fix betrayal, but you can honor it by never letting it happen again." He nodded slowly. "I want to." "Then start by teaching your soldiers to listen before they laugh." Her voice was calm, but it cut deep, not cruelly but truthfully. The kind of truth that leaves scars that heal right. Marcus lingered, hands in his pockets. "They're calling you a legend already," he said. "Ghost one. The woman who broke records with a busted rifle." Rachel smiled faintly, not looking up. "Legends are just mistakes people retell until they sound noble." He gave a half-laugh that faded quickly. "Still, people need them." "Then give them better ones," she said. The silence stretched again. Marcus looked at the rifle on the table, the bent barrel, the taped stock. "Why never fix it?" Rachel's gaze followed his. "Because it reminded me that nothing perfect ever survives war. Perfection breaks. What's left still works if you respect it." He studied her face, the calm, the exhaustion, the faint tremor that never really stopped. "Does it ever go away?" he asked quietly. "The shaking." He nodded. "No," she said, "but you learn to move with it." Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far off. The night air pressed against the bay's thin metal walls. Marcus hesitated. "They're sending you back, aren't they?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She tightened the last screw on the rifle, then set the tool down gently. "There's always another mission," she said finally, "but not the kind you think." "What kind then?" She looked at him, eyes steady. "There's a program, unofficial, recovery. They take what's left of people like me and use us to rebuild others. Not combat, counseling, reintegration." He blinked. "You teaching." "Not teaching," she corrected, "listening." The word hung there, simple and powerful. Marcus nodded slowly. "That sounds right." "It's not redemption," she added. "It's service. Different kind of battlefield." They stood in silence for a while, the hum of the lights the only sound. Marcus cleared his throat. "The colonel wanted me to tell you the range wants to name the record after you, the Thompson Standard." Rachel chuckled softly. "Sounds like something from a weapons manual." "He said it's tradition," Marcus added, "when someone changes the definition of possible." Rachel thought for a long moment, then shook her head. "No name. Let it stand without one. The next shooter doesn't need a shadow to chase." Marcus didn't argue. He understood now. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "For what it's worth," he said, voice thick, "you changed me." Rachel smiled faintly. "Then it wasn't for nothing." When he left, the silence returned, but this time it felt like peace. Rachel packed the rifle into its worn case, her movements slow, deliberate. She paused, running a hand over the case lid. The initials she'd carved there years ago, RCWPTB, caught the light. She whispered, "Rest easy, boys." Then she closed it and stood. Outside, the base was winding down. Trucks rumbled in the distance. Floodlights flickered on one by one. The air smelled like rain. Rachel walked past the barracks, her boots crunching gravel. Every few steps, a soldier would nod or salute. None of them called out. The respect was silent, the only kind she could accept. Private Alina waited by the gate, holding a small box. When she saw Rachel, she straightened nervously. "Ma'am," she said, then corrected herself, "Master Sergeant." Rachel shook her head gently, "Just Rachel." Alina smiled awkwardly, offering the box. "It's from the team. We wanted you to have this." Rachel opened it. Inside lay a single spent casing, polished to a shine, mounted on a small wooden base. Engraved beneath it were 4 words. "Still hit every target." For the first time all day, Rachel's composure cracked. Her throat tightened. "It's perfect," she whispered. Alina nodded, eyes glistening. "We're sorry." "I know," Rachel said. "Make it mean something." Alina straightened, the kind of posture born from respect rather than fear. "We will." Rachel rested a hand on her shoulder. "Then you've already done more than most." She left the base before midnight, no escort, no ceremony. Just a duffel, a rifle case, and a sky that couldn't decide whether to rain. The road stretched ahead, black ribbon under moonlight, bordered by pine and memory. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running from ghosts. She was walking with them. Every mile hummed with echoes, the laughter that had once cut her, the silence that had healed her, the gunfire that had freed her. In her rearview mirror, Fort Benink's lights faded to a glow, small, distant, almost peaceful. She whispered into the quiet cab, "You can rest now." The tremor in her hands eased. Far behind her in the command office, Colonel Patterson stared at a file on his desk. Rachel E. Thompson, reinstatement denied, medical classification permanent. He closed it, then opened another envelope, new orders. At the top, Special Assignment, Veterans Recovery Division. He smiled faintly, always another mission. He signed it with steady hand. Across base housing, Marcus sat alone outside his quarters, staring at the night. Madison joined him, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. "She's gone," she said. "I know. Think she'll come back?" Marcus shook his head. "People like her don't come back. They just keep moving until the world catches up." Madison took a sip, then sighed. "I can't stop replaying how we treated her." "That's the point," he said. "We're supposed to remember." They sat in silence, listening to the rain begin. Down the road, Rachel pulled over at a rest stop overlooking a valley. The rain tapped gently on the windshield, rhythmic, almost like her old tremor. She watched it for a while, then opened the window. Cool air rushed in, clean and sharp. She took the spent casing from the box, holding it up to the light. For a moment, she imagined the sound of her team's laughter, the real kind, from long ago. Then she smiled. "Still hit every target," she whispered. She placed the casing on the dashboard and started the engine. The rain grew heavier, the headlights slicing through it like hope through fog. Her voice, calm and reflective, might have filled a narrator's booth, though she was only talking to herself. You learn after enough battles that the hardest fights aren't the ones with bullets. They're the ones with silence, with memory, with guilt. A pause. But if you listen long enough, you realize silence can heal too. It just takes time and courage, the kind that doesn't look like courage at all. The truck rolled on, taillights fatting into the storm. Later that night, lightning split the horizon. For an instant, the reflection of her old team appeared in the window, smiling, proud, whole. She didn't flinch. She just nodded a silent salute. Then the vision faded, leaving only rain and road. And maybe that was enough. Because sometimes the mission isn't to win. It's to carry the memory well enough that no one forgets what it cost. The Veterans Recovery Division didn't look like a base. It looked like quiet. Red brick buildings half hidden by pine trees, a lake that caught the morning light, no marching, no gunfire. Just stillness. Rachel parked her truck near the main entrance. For a long moment she didn't move. She watched the ripples on the lake, the way mist rose off the water like ghosts leaving for somewhere better. Then she reached for her duffel and stepped out. The plaque by the door read, "For those still fighting inside." She smiled faintly. "Guess that includes me." Inside, the air smelled of coffee and antiseptic. A nurse behind the desk looked up and froze for half a second. Recognition passed across her face, the way it always did now. "You're her," the nurse whispered, "the sniper from Bennying." Rachel gave a small nod. "Not anymore, just staff." The nurse blinked, then smiled shyly. "Welcome home." Her office was barely larger than a storage closet, a desk, 2 chairs, a window facing the lake. On the wall hung a simple framed quote, "Not every wound bleeds." She sat behind the desk, setting down the single photo she owned, her team, sand-streaked and laughing. For a moment she just looked at them. Then she whispered, "Let's get to work." Her first patient arrived that afternoon. Corporal Isaac Reed, age 26, Afghanistan. He limped in, leaning on a crutch, jaw clenched tight. His record said non-combat injury, but Rachel had seen that phrase enough to know it was code for survivor's guilt. He didn't look at her when he sat down. "You were a shooter," he muttered. "What are you doing in therapy?" Rachel folded her hands, listening. He smirked bitter. "I don't talk." "Then I'll listen to your silence." That earned a flicker of surprise. He studied her face, saw the tremor in her hands. "You nervous?" "Always," she said. "Doesn't stop me." Something shifted in his expression. The hostility softened just a fraction. They sat in silence for a long while. She didn't feel it. Eventually, he sighed. "They said I should come here, 'cause you understand what it's like to lose everyone." Rachel met his eyes. "I don't understand, I just remember." He swallowed. "Same thing, maybe." She nodded. "Maybe." It wasn't progress yet, but it was movement, and movement meant life. Days turned into weeks. The routine was simple, almost meditative. She met with soldiers, she listened, she helped them piece together what war had broken. She taught breathing techniques disguised as sniper drills, control, patience, rhythm. Her tremor never left, but the soldiers didn't see it as weakness. They saw it as proof that healing didn't require perfection. Some days she spoke in group sessions, telling pieces of stories without names. How silence on a radio can feel like death. How the hardest part isn't the firefight, it's the aftermath. Other days she said nothing at all, just sat beside someone staring at the lake until the shaking in their hands matched hers. At night, the compound went quiet except for frogs and wind. Rachel would walk the path along the water, the moonlight sliding over the ripples. That's when she'd feel them most, her old team. Not haunting, just near. She'd talk to them softly. "You'd laugh if you saw me now, me, counselor, teaching breathing exercises." The night would answer with rustling leaves, like laughter caught in branches. Then she'd whisper, "I think I'm finally learning what survival's for." One evening, while she was finishing notes, there was a knock on her door. "Come in." Marcus stepped inside, rain dripping from his jacket. His uniform looked freshly pressed, but his eyes carried weeks of wear. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said. "They assigned me to assist with resilience training," he replied. "Figured I could learn from the best." Rachel smiled faintly. "You sure you're ready to take orders from maintenance again?" He chuckled, "Guess I earned that." He sat opposite her. For a while neither spoke. Rain pattered softly outside. Finally he said, "I still hear that day sometimes. The shots, the drones, everything. You ever stop hearing it?" She shook her head. "No, but it changes. At first it sounds like punishment. Later it just sounds like proof that you lived." He nodded slowly. "You ever miss it?" "The fight?" "Yeah." She thought for a long moment. "Sometimes, but mostly I miss the reason we fought." He stared at the floor. "Maybe this is it. Maybe this is what fighting looks like now." Rachel leaned back, her eyes soft. "Then let's make it count." Word spread quietly across the recovery center. Soldiers who'd refused counseling started showing up, not for therapy, but to train with Thompson. She never corrected them. If calling it training helped them walk through the door, that was enough. They'd line up at the makeshift range behind the facility. No live rounds, just air rifles, targets shaped like ghosts. She'd guide them through slow breathing, heartbeat focus, controlled release. "Every shot," she'd say, "starts long before the trigger. It starts when you decide you're still in control." And when one of them missed, she'd smile gently. "Then that's one less bullet haunting you." The sessions became legend in their own quiet way. Not because of the scores, but because for the first time, soldiers were learning to forgive themselves. One afternoon, after a particularly hard session, Rachel sat by the lake alone. The sun shimmered on the surface, turning it into liquid gold. Captain Kim approached, her crisp uniform a strange contrast to the tranquility. "Thompson," she said softly, "got news from JAG. The tribunal finalized it. Brooks and Chen pled guilty." Rachel nodded slowly. "They'll live longer than they deserve, but that's justice." Kim studied her. "You could have asked for recognition, a commendation. The army would have given it." Rachel smiled faintly. "They already did." She gestured toward the center, where Isaac Reed was teaching another patient how to breathe through panic. "That's my medal." Kim's voice softened. "You ever think about going back to active duty?" Rachel looked at her trembling hands. "No rifle left that fits me." Kim nodded, understanding. "You know, not many people would have handled it like you did." Rachel chuckled. "I didn't handle it, I survived it, big difference." That night, she dreamt again of the desert. The sound of wind over dunes. The cries of her team. But this time, it ended differently. In the dream, she was back at that final stand. But instead of gunfire, she heard laughter, not cruel but warm. Her team's laughter echoing through dust. She looked down, and the rifle in her hands wasn't broken anymore. It was whole. She woke with tears on her face, and a calm she hadn't felt in years. Weeks later, the center held a small ceremony, no press, no flags. Just soldiers, staff, and quiet. Patterson was there, standing beside Marcus. They unveiled a simple plaque near the training yard. "In honor of Ghost Squadron, for the battles we cannot see." Rachel didn't give a speech. She just stepped forward, placed a single casing beneath the plaque, and saluted. Then she said quietly, "Mission complete." As evening fell, she returned to her office one last time. Her reassignment orders lay on the desk. Field Outreach Coordinator, Pacific Region. More soldiers to meet, more ghosts to ease. She packed her things, the photo, the casing, a small notebook filled with names of those she'd helped. When she reached the door, Marcus appeared again, holding something wrapped in cloth. "Before you go," he said, "we wanted you to have this." He handed it to her. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a new rifle stock, handmade from walnut, engraved with 6 initials, her team's, and one more added at the end, RT. Her eyes shimmered. "You carved this?" Marcus nodded. "We rebuilt the old rifle, thought maybe it deserved a second life too." Rachel ran her fingers over the letters, tracing each groove. "Thank you," she whispered. "Maybe it'll remind you you're still part of the fight," he said. She smiled. Maybe it'll remind me I don't have to fight alone. She left before dawn the next morning. Fog curled over the lake. The world was quiet again. As she drove past the entrance, the rising sun caught the words on the plaque, making them glow. Battles we cannot see. In the mirror, the facility disappeared behind trees, but the light lingered, that same golden hue that had followed her through every mission, every heartbreak. Her voice, low, reflective, carried like a narrator's confession as she spoke to herself on the road. War doesn't end when the shooting stops. It ends when you finally stop fighting yourself. A pause. I used to think my shaking was weakness. Now I know it's proof that I kept holding on. She looked out the window. The horizon stretched endless and forgiving. Maybe that's what strength really is. Not silence, not perfection, just the courage to keep showing up. She smiled to herself, the kind of smile that doesn't reach lips but fills the heart. And sometimes when you finally stop running, the ghosts stop chasing. They start walking beside you instead. The truck rolled on into dawn, the rebuilt rifle resting quietly on the seat beside her, a promise made of wood, steel, and memory. The air in the Pacific always smelled like salt and renewal. Rachel could never decide which she needed more. The outreach compound sat on a cliff above the water, low buildings, open-air halls, and wind that carried the sound of waves instead of gunfire. It was supposed to be paradise, but to soldiers recovering from combat, even paradise felt foreign. Rachel stepped out of her truck, boots crunching on coral dust, the new rifle case slung across her shoulder. She'd rebuilt it herself from the walnut stock Marcus had carved, piece by piece, a ritual of healing. She didn't fire it anymore. She just kept it near, a reminder that broken things could be whole again in different ways. Inside the main hall, a dozen young veterans sat in a loose circle. Some stared at the floor, some at the sea beyond the open windows. A few looked up when Rachel entered, that small moment of curiosity, of silent measuring. Who is she? Morning, she said quietly. I'm Rachel, not here to fix anyone, just here to listen. The only answer was the surf. That was fine. Silence always spoke first. After introductions, the coordinator pulled her aside. We've got one we're worried about, he said softly. Private First Class Leo Mendez. He's been here 6 weeks, barely talks. Marine sniper, lost his spotter on recon. Won't go near the range. Won't touch a weapon. Says he can still hear the shot that wasn't his. Rachel nodded. Where is he now? Beach South Path. He goes there every morning. She found him where the sand met rock, sitting barefoot with his knees pulled to his chest, staring at the water like it owed him an answer. You must be Mendez, she said, stopping a few feet away. He didn't turn. You the shrink. No, mechanics division, she said, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. I fix things that don't stay fixed. That earned her half a glance. They told me you were some kind of legend. Legends are just people whose mistakes got famous. He actually smirked, brief but real. Rachel sat down beside him, not too close. The tide crept up around their boots. They say you won't go near the range, she said. I go near it, he muttered. I just don't shoot. Because... He exhaled, because I missed once. Rachel waited, the silence stretched. Finally, he said it. Wind shifted, I hesitated. My spotter leaned out to correct me. The round hit him instead, my fault. My hands, my rifle. She let the words settle, heavy and sacred. Then she said softly, you know what my rifle looked like. He shook his head. Broken, she said. Bent barrel, cracked stock, sights off by half a degree. But it still hit every target, not because it was perfect, because I stopped expecting it to be. He looked at her then, really looked. You saying I should shoot again? No, she said. I'm saying you should forgive the part of you that's still aiming at yesterday. The surf roared like applause none of them asked for. Days passed. Leo didn't speak much, but he started showing up to breakfast, to group talks, to the small maintenance shed where Rachel repaired tools no one else cared about. He watched her hands shake while she worked. One afternoon he asked, "That tremor ever stop?" "Not once," she said. "How do you even hold a rifle?" She smiled, "Same way you hold grief, carefully." He didn't reply, but that night he was seen walking near the practice range, just watching the targets swing in the wind. Rachel wrote notes by the lake each evening. Her reflections read like field reports written to ghosts. Patient Mendez shows slow return of curiosity, no forced optimism. Good. Reminds me of myself before I learn to breathe again. Maybe that's the point. We meet our younger selves in others and hope we give them gentler answers. Sometimes she'd stop writing, close her eyes, and hear the echo of waves against hull metal. In those sounds, she imagined her old team somewhere far off, still watching, still proud. One morning, thunderclouds gathered early. Rachel found Leo packing outside the supply hut, fists clenched. "Bad night?" she asked. He nodded. "Dreams. He was calling for me again. I couldn't reach him." Rachel put down the wrench in her hand. "You want to try something?" He frowned. "Try what?" She pointed toward the practice field. "Breathing, targets optional." He hesitated, then followed. The field was slick with drizzle, targets swaying. Rachel handed him an unloaded rifle, not a sniper's precision weapon, just a trainer. "Don't fire," she said. "Just breathe. Look through the scope if you want. Count heartbeats. In, out. 3, 2, 1. He lifted the rifle slowly. His hands trembled, the same tremor Rachel knew too well. "Steady isn't about still," she said. "It's about rhythm." He exhaled. The tremor eased a fraction. Rain dripped down the barrel, down his cheek. He lowered the weapon. "That's the first time I've looked through glass since." "Since you survived," she finished gently. He nodded, eyes bright. In the weeks that followed, Leo joined every session. He didn't talk about guilt anymore. He asked questions instead, about breathing, about control, about what came after. One evening, as the sun sank into the ocean, he approached Rachel with a sealed envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "My discharge papers. They want me to rejoin, training instructor. I don't know if I should." She studied him for a moment. "Why do you think they want you back?" "Because I'm still good," he said. "And why do you think you should?" He hesitated. "Because I don't deserve it." Rachel smiled sadly. "Then maybe that's exactly why you should." He frowned. "I don't understand." "Deserving doesn't matter. Purpose does. You don't go back to prove you're unbroken. You go back to show that broken still works." He folded the papers slowly. "Will you sign my recommendation?" "I already did," she said. He blinked. "You knew I'd ask." "I hoped you would." Later that night, Rachel sat by the shoreline alone. Lightning far off illuminated the sea in pulses, like the beat of a sleeping heart. She thought about how every life she touched echoed back to her, each soldier a mirror reflecting what she'd once been. And she realized something simple but profound. Healing wasn't about forgetting the war. It was about carrying it differently. Weeks later, the command center held a small farewell for Leo. The whole facility gathered. He looked nervous, like a rookie again. Rachel stood beside him, offering quiet strength. When his name was called, he stepped forward and saluted the group. "I used to think survival was punishment," he said. "Now I think it's permission to keep fighting. Differently." Rachel felt something in her chest unclench. Pride, maybe, or peace. After the applause, Leo turned to her. "You ever gonna come back to Bennying?" She shook her head. "I already did everything I needed there." He grinned. "Yeah, you did." When the ceremony ended, he hugged her, a quick, awkward gesture that said everything words couldn't. "Thank you," he whispered. "Go make your ghosts proud," she said. That night Rachel walked the cliff path again. The sky was clear now, the storm gone, the stars sharp and bright. She stopped near the edge, feeling the wind in her hair, the weight of the rifle case across her shoulder. She set it down, unlatched it, and removed the rebuilt rifle whole, polished, beautiful. She aimed it at the horizon, not to shoot but to look. Through the scope, she saw nothing but endless water and starlight. And for the first time in years, her hands didn't shake. Not because the tremor had vanished, it was still there, but because she no longer fought it. She whispered to the night, "You can rest too." A voice in her mind, maybe her own, maybe one of theirs, answered softly, "We already are." At dawn she wrote another letter, this one not to the army, not to anyone official, just to herself. "I used to think strength was about holding the line. Now I think it's about knowing when to lower the weapon. I can't erase the things I've done, but I can make sure others don't have to carry them the same way." Maybe that's all redemption ever was, teaching peace to those still waiting for war. She folded the note, slipped it into the rifle case, and zipped it shut. Then she walked back toward the compound as the sun lifted over the ocean, gold light spilling through palms, catching on the plaque that read for those still fighting inside. She smiled, because for once she was. The ocean always sounded different at night. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it remembered. Rachel sat on the weathered dock that reached out into the black water, her boots hanging over the edge, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. The moon was half hidden behind clouds, the light fractured, like her, she thought, still shining, just not whole. She wasn't running anymore. She stopped needing to. Behind her, the recovery compound slept. The lights in the windows glowed soft and steady. Each one marked a soldier still learning how to live again. It was enough. Footsteps creaked on the planks. Marcus's familiar silhouette appeared, carrying a thermos and the sound of tired laughter. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Never could," she said. He poured coffee into a second mug and sat beside her. For a long moment they listened to the tide and said nothing. "You hear the news?" he asked finally. "Mendez made instructor. They're calling his class the Ghost Standard." Rachel smiled faintly. That boy deserved it. Marcus nodded. "You know, you keep saying you're done, but your fingerprints are on everything that's changing." Then maybe change finally learned to shake hands. He chuckled softly. "You always talk like that. Only when it matters." The wind shifted, rain threatened again. Marcus leaned back on his palms. "They offered you promotion," he said. "Director of the division, why'd you turn it down?" Rachel looked at the horizon. "Because leadership is louder than I am. I do better in quiet places." He nodded. "You could have made the quiet bigger." She smiled. "Maybe, but sometimes you don't lead from the front anymore. You lead from example and disappear before anyone notices who started it." The waves slapped softly against the dock. Marcus watched her profile, the same calm focus he'd seen that day on the range, except now the edge was gone. "You ever think about picking up the rifle again?" Rachel ran a thumb along the rim of her mug. "I already did, just in different ways." From the compound came faint music, someone strumming a guitar, off-key, honest. The kind of sound that fills emptiness instead of masking it. Marcus took a sip. "When you left Bennying, people asked where you went. Command said you'd been reassigned. I told them you were busy teaching ghosts to breathe." Rachel laughed quietly, accurate enough. He studied her trembling hands, still there. "Always." "But softer," he said. She nodded, "because they finally have somewhere to go." A seagull cried out above them and vanished into the dark. Marcus stood, stretching. "You staying out here all night?" "Probably." He started to walk away, then paused. "You know, I used to think soldiers were made of steel. You proved we're made of something tougher." "What's that?" "Forgiveness." She didn't answer, just smiled as he walked back toward the light. When the sound of his steps faded, she took the rebuilt rifle from beside her and laid it across her knees. The walnut stock gleamed in moonlight, each initial carved into it shining like small stars. RCWPTB, and her own at the end. She touched each letter gently. "You'd laugh if you saw what this turned into," she whispered. "No medals, no parades, just people learning to breathe." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of rain and cordite that only memory can invent. "Guess we finally finished the mission," she said. For a second the water seemed to flash, moonlight or maybe something else. Then it was gone. Weeks passed. Letters came and went, thank yous from soldiers she'd helped, invitations to speak, commendations she ignored. She answered none of them. The work was enough. One morning, as the first light broke, she woke to find a package on her doorstep. No sender, no markings. Inside, a folded flag and a small card. "For Ghost One, from those who never forgot." She held it for a long time. Then she took it to the lake, unfolded it carefully, and let the wind catch it. The flag fluttered above the water, then settled on the surface like a promise kept. That evening she met with the newest arrivals, 6 veterans, quiet and guarded. She watched them fidget, exchange wary glances. "Here's the rule," she said. "Nobody has to be fine, you just have to be here." A few chuckles broke the tension. Someone asked, "You really that sniper from the video?" She shook her head. "I was. Now I'm just someone who knows what shaking feels like." Laughter again, real this time, the kind that begins healing. After the session she sat alone in her office, writing one last entry in the notebook. "You can't unlearn war, but you can teach peace louder than the echoes. Every soldier who finds calm passes it on. Maybe that's how the fight ends, one steady breath at a time. If they ever remember me, I hope it's not for the shots I made, but for the ones I helped them stop firing." She closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf beside the photo of her team. Later that night, as storm clouds rolled in, she walked the path down to the water again. The first drops of rain hit her shoulders. The air smelled of ozone and salt. She tilted her face to the sky, eyes closed. The rain soaked her hair, her jacket, the wooden stock of the rifle slung over her back. She whispered to the night, "You can stop testing me now, I'm still here." And for the first time in a long, long while, she felt an answer that wasn't silence. It was peace. When morning came, the storm had washed the world clean. The compound glittered under sunlight, the soldiers already gathering for breakfast. Rachel watched from a distance, smiles, banter, the easy sound of normalcy. She built that piece by quiet piece. Marcus approached from the mess hall, waving a sheet of paper. "You got mail again," he said, handing it to her. She opened it, a note in neat handwriting. "Dear Rachel, I made it through my first week as an instructor. The new recruits think I'm unshakable. If only they knew. I tell them sometimes the best shots come from broken rifles. Hope that's okay. Leo Mendez." Rachel folded the letter slowly. "That's more than okay." She handed it to Marcus. "Frame it." He smiled. "For the wall." "For the reminder," she said. That evening, she finally did something she hadn't done in years. She walked out to the practice range behind the compound, set up a single target, and loaded one round. She wasn't testing herself. She was closing a circle. Breath in. Breath out. Heartbeat. Stillness. The rifle barked once, echoing against the hills. When the smoke cleared, the target stood untouched, a single hole dead center. She lowered the rifle, smiling through tears. "That one's for all of you," she whispered. Then she turned away, leaving the rifle resting on the stand, barrel gleaming in sunset light. As night fell, the narrator's voice, the one inside her, the one that had carried her through every mission, returned one last time, softer now, like the closing line of a film. They mocked the trembling hands. They called the rifle broken. But the world forgets. Sometimes the flaw is what finds the target. I thought I'd lost everything that day on the range. Turns out, I was being given back the parts of myself that war tried to erase. A pause. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't swagger or demand applause. It just keeps showing up, shaking, scarred, but steady enough to make the next shot count. The sound of waves grew louder, merging with the rhythm of breath and wind. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The camera would fade wide here. The dock, the sea, the compound lights behind her. Rachel walking along the shoreline, small against the horizon, steady despite the tremor. A survivor, yes. But more than that, a teacher. The ghosts had finally gone quiet.